was more than enough to warrant that aggression. So good job.
Oh, huge! That is, when we were talking about this buckets, like they used an ultimate and you countered it with a cooldown. So like in terms of the like shifting the power and the advantage in a fight, that is
Exactly.
primo plays.
Oh my god, what is this FOV? Main thing I guess we could talk about before even learning the game is address this hero selection problem. So I guess you mentioned like you weren't really thinking about your heroes, but there must have been like some motivation here to go Winston, right? Was it the map? Was it the heroes on your team?
It was the heroes on my team. It was the ball and the Genji, and I didn't think Rein was gonna do much, so that's why I chose to go Winston.
Okay, right on. That's the right answer. That's the perfect answer.
Absolutely. You say you weren't thinking about it, but that is the perfect reason.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I'd be a little more concerned if you just closed your eyes and like moved your mouse around until you landed on Winston, but yeah, that's a good answer.
And just to let you mad scientist, or let you know mad scientist, usually we'll probably watch about a minute or two of the gameplay at start. May not give any comments as we're just trying to focus in on what we think is like the main thing that we want to address during the session. So
Okay.
yeah,
Sounds good.
just letting you know if it's quiet for the next minute, that's why.
Gotcha.
First thing I'm noticing right off the bat is both your cooldowns, both that initial bubble and your jump out, were a bit premature. I would say there was no real threat to you when you decided to bubble. You weren't like looking to shield dance. You weren't looking to cut anything off. You were just felt you might be under pressure, but you weren't actually under pressure because they weren't looking at you. And then the same thing for the jump away. You were still at full HP, saving those resources when you actually need them, or saving them for the opportunity to go more aggressive could have been really good. Like, for example, if you used your bubble, take a few steps up, bubbled their whole main choke, so there are people on the back line there, their Widowmaker, for example, wouldn't have any sightlines, their Ana potentially wouldn't have any sightlines. That's just an instant way into a fight for the rest of your team.
John, you madman.
That makes sense.
And you said that you primarily play Zarya and Reinhardt, right?
Yes.
How many hours do you have on Winston, or like ignoring hours? What's your kind of comfort level on Winston?
I'd say my comfort level is pretty low. I wound up spoiler alert, we did win this round, but the next one I wound up switching because it just wasn't working anymore.
All right. Well, let's keep going.
Good cleanup. Ooh, I kind of would like to see you clean up that Widow, but that's fine. So yeah, main thought processes for Winston, especially in a dive comp, is you should be looking to isolate people, like with your bubble, like I mentioned. Either isolate the tank so their backline can't help them, or isolate backline so no one can come peel for them with your bubble. So those are the situations we're looking for, and this looks perfect. So it looks like they basically ignored your bubble, but what they were forced to do there was everyone push into point, which is exactly what your team wanted. And then your team's able to collapse all around them and just destroy them, as we're seeing right now. So even though like your bubble itself didn't immediately do anything, just the pathing we saw their Ana was forced to take means you found like really good value from your bubble there. So that was good.
I really do like on both of these fights, on the first one that you went to the left side and kind of walked in. On the second one, you were positioned quite well, and then in order to get to the fight, you jumped in. But if you were going a little bit earlier, you also could have cut them off the same way without having to use your jump. It's going to be very situationally dependent. Like if you see them, moving in and you jump in to split them like that, that's great. But there can also be other situations, like if you're trying to actually go on the backline, for example, being able to engage on them without your jump is going to be really important. Especially if they're their Widow grapples away or something, you can have that jump to chase. Or if something goes really wrong, and for example, like on your jump in, you get slept and then they charge you, you're going to need that jump to escape. So I really like the way that you're engaging on these, always on these side angles. You're not kind of going from the immediate jumps in. But yeah, I think that just from the way that I've seen it, I think that the more thought about, are you doing front line, are you doing back line, and whether you're jumping to engage or because you're already in the positions where you have the option of not needing to use your jump in order to actually start fighting. And then just patience on cooldowns, I think, is probably a theme that we'll see throughout this, but let's keep watching.
Yeah. Unfortunate picks come through. So now we're playing at disadvantage.
Yeah, I like this just a little slow M1 sort of thing.
I think I wound up knocking them out of the mines here on accident.
So what's your thinking using Primal Rage? What's like the thought process of when you want to use it, what you want to use it for?
Well, there, I think I used it just to stay alive since we had owned the point. I felt like I could stall long enough until we had the respawns. So it was just like a stalling primal.
Okay. For Stalling Primal, that was pretty good. Like you said, you kept yourself alive, you kept control of the point, you slowed their aggression. I would have liked to see a little more, I guess I should say, like intentional disruption. You were kind of just bouncing around between different members. If you had gotten on singular members, like backline members, ideally, like I guess they're no longer on Widow, but on Ana or on Brig.
I mean, yeah, even Brig is pretty squishy against a primal.
Yeah. They can't really do anything about that. Like what you did do is you wrestled point control back in the favor of your team, which was good. But I think you could have done another step of potentially giving your team a reason to start fighting. So move it from not just stabilizing, but a reason to go aggressive is a perfect opportunity here, I think. And all that really takes is deciding a target and looking to isolate them with like intention, like looking to get them to a certain location or away from a certain location, or try and like wall bounce them and juggle them in a corner or something like that. But what you did was not bad, and I think it's going to mean a team fight win coming up for your team as long as everyone stays alive.
Yeah, so along with the patience on the cooldowns, I think that you can probably treat Primal a little bit the same here. I think that you Primaled it around the 300 HP, and obviously you don't want to get too low to the point where, I mean, it happens to probably every single Winston player where they try and thread the needle a little bit too tightly. And they try and get that full 1,000 HP reset when they're at 1 HP, and then they get punished for it. Every Winston player, chat will know this. Every Winston player presses Q, they hear the audio, and they still end up in the spawn room. So maximize, and then boom, you get clapped. So there is this very, very fine line between how close that you want to get. But that line, I think, is because you're at 191 there, and you got bounced away, and your Brig was still around there. So I think that. I think that on your jump, on your bubble, and on your primal, you can get closer to riding that line. And it's like one of the things that I'm probably going to talk about a little bit later in the VOD. I feel like I'm going to, at some point, go on a limit testing rant. But you do need to go closer to that limit of getting optimal value out of your cooldowns. And sorry, what SR are you again?
I'm like at 2,500, like right at low plat on tank.
So this is like a pretty classic plat problem, is not getting value out of your individual cooldown usages, including your ultimates. This is like a pretty classic thing. Because especially at the higher ranks, when you're talking about like GM and top 500, the game becomes like turn-based, where it's like, this is traded for this cooldown, trades for this cooldown, trades for this ultimate, and then sometimes it breaks down to chaos, where it's basically just FFA for who can kill faster. But at this elo, it's going to be like things are going to be a lot based on the individual impact of your cooldowns and how much value you can get for each cooldown and how much value you can get for each primal. So if you're going to be like really pushing on any hero, if you're going to be pushing your damage numbers, your healing numbers, any of your statistics, you want to be trying to get your maximum value out of them. So especially when you have something that, like anything, you want to be pushing it to the limit here. But that also is going to involve having to find that limit. And then the one other thing that I had before we go forward is Winston being a very, I don't want to say hyper-mobile, because Ball exists, but because you are such a mobile character, here you go all the way back to your Ana, but like your team is still up fighting. I think that you only have one down, and it is your Ana, and you're going back for her, right? But there's, like, you have to know where the health packs are. Especially on Koth maps, it is, even if your Ana was alive here, There's going to be other people that she wants to be healing. Things that she can be doing, like looking for an anti-nade or trying to put a few pot shots in. But you can really relieve the pressure on your healers by getting a health pack. And the easy health pack right here is the one by Elephant. So putting a jump out here and then either walking back or getting in position to re-engage the fight, that will be a lot faster here than retreating all the way, going completely out of the fight where you're not even a threat, you're not even a concern to the opponent, and then getting back into the fight. Because there's 3 people up there, so you're going to make it a lot harder on the people who are already up, and then instead of kind of like fighting a 4v4 or because fights are not over just because you lost your main healer. So you need to be fighting, especially if the rest of your team is still fighting. So I don't like that you abandoned your team here and you did it to go find your main support instead of a mega health pack. So this is going to be one of the things where if you are doing this kind of ping pong, bounce in, bounce out, engage, disengage sort of thing, whenever possible, whenever you have the option to disengage to a mega, very, very, very valuable.
Okay.
I just want to add on to that as well. Thinking about where you start and end primal can be really important because of the way it resets your jump cooldown.
Yes.
So for example, you started this primal like right after you got booped back by Brig, I think. And you had your jump off cooldown, you could have jumped in, reset the jump, gone deeper, found a target with more information as you're starting primal instead of just primaling with just the Reinhardt in your face. Yeah. Same thing goes for when you're ending this. If you were using the last jump of your primal rage to jump towards that mega pack, you could pick it up and then you'll have your jump to go back and re-engage as normal Winston and get back into the fight right away.
Yeah, I didn't even
maximize that jump time for sure.
Yeah, because you can go really deep, and then as long as you're watching your timer, you can jump out, and then in midair your primal ends, and you just jump again. So yeah, it's yes, absolutely. Ooh, that's a pucker.
It was very close. I got scared.
We take those. Your team is aggressive.
Oh, yep. Oh, you got stuck.
So this is kind of the idea James was talking about, that sort of pushback where every time you go aggressive for something, the enemy team's going to have a turn next. And it doesn't seem like your team's really respecting that. It seems like our team always wants to go, 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 and then we overextend.
My kind of Overwatch.
It hasn't just been you, it's been like your DPS, your ball. It seems like every time we win a team fight, we immediately lose 2 members to that over-aggression.
But
then
still
we come
working.
back because they do the same thing, right? They think, oh, we just got 2 picks, we can immediately push the point, and then there's 4 people when we come back. So, not super relevant to solo queue, but recognizing these situations and maybe second-guessing yourself about when to hard engage, when maybe they might have more resources ready to go than you, can be something to learn to really improve.
If it matters, I was actually duoed with somebody in this game. It was the Ana, actually.
Okay.
Oh.
So that's why you were running back to her. You trusted her.
You trust. She's the only one you trust in Elo. In this Elo.
Yep.
I understand. Don't even trust the health packs. Only trust friend.
Yeah.
Apes strong together.
I mean, the health pack's not in voice chat, so.
Exactly. What a fucking thrower.
So this is going to be a much closer ranged map. Going to be harder to execute the dive, but not impossible. We saw it a little bit last round, but something that can be really annoying as Winston is trying to get set up for a dive without taking a bunch of poke damage. Luckily, in this composition, they don't have a lot of consistent damage, but there was that one fight, like right before you primaled, where that Tracer was just annoying you, and those situations are going to pop up all the time with DPS just like seeing you setting up for a jump and just throwing shots your way. So weaving into a fight can be like just as difficult for you as it is for like a flanker like Genji or Tracer, and it's important to keep that in mind because if you just run it down towards their front line, right now it doesn't matter because like I said, their damage is pretty inconsistent, but if they had like a McCree behind that shield or a Tracer was up here ready to clip you, she's just going to force your bubble, force you to jump back, and you're not going to be ready to dive. So taking safer routes and taking your time basically to be smarter about setting up for a dive can go a long way on Winston because you want to be engaging at full HP, obviously.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we want to go aggressive.
Yeah, so... do you want to take this one, Lou?
I was just going to say this sleep dart's probably going to hit because you don't have bubble. One, you are moving in one... Oh, it didn't hit. Okay. But it very much should have. One, you're moving in a straight line. You're not coming from an off angle. Ano saw you before you jumped, saw you during your jump, saw you when you landed. That's a very easy sleep dart to land. You didn't have bubble to outplay it, and you were chasing her through a choke point, which you take up. All she has to do is hit that little hit that little box that's a choke, and she's gonna hit you, right? But apparently she managed to miss that. So generally, those are the situations you want to avoid when you don't have the resources to warrant that aggression.
Yeah, and so that situation very much arose because you were very, very preemptive on that bubble in the first engagement. You were still like 450 HP, and you have an Ana, right? You can take some damage and then bubble, and you have your Ana, because your Ana can shoot through your bubble, so you can have your Ana heal you up. Or if that Reinhardt tries to go aggressive on you, your Ana can threaten with the nade. The Reinhardt has to be, I mean, maybe with this elo he's not going to think about that, but it has to be really careful to go aggressive and potentially get purpled. So you definitely save your bubble a little bit later, because you don't want to get to the point, especially if we're talking about like optimizing, getting the most value out of your cooldowns, right? If you bubble when you're at like 500 HP, and then they break the bubble and then they start damaging you, what you could have done is taken some damage to your person, especially in the higher, words are hard. Yeah, so while you're still in armor, right, the healing is more effective. So especially, you could take that damage where the healing is going to be more effective in your armor and then bubble. You can go 100 HP, down to like 250 before you bubble, because then by the time they break through your bubble to start damaging you again, hopefully your healers have actually put you back up to that 500 HP. And this is very similar to the way that Reinhardts won't kind of hard shield when they're going in. They're either going to hop or they're going to flash or like swing for a little bit, is because they're going to take some of that damage to their person, because healers can't heal barriers, but they can heal you, and that'll, that damage that's coming in is going to be healed up. It's like free ult charge and free space that you're able to take, because those resources are getting replenished. So, and then because you used it so early, when you did go for a hard engage, you didn't have it. And that's, I mean, especially at this elo, I don't know how the Ana managed to miss it, but this is something that is going to get punished at higher elos, or even probably the majority of situations at this elo. So this goes back to kind of what we're talking about, thinking more in like turn-based sort of things, is that in this meantime, in the same way that like a Tracer recalls, she has to kind of start staging and posturing before she can really go aggressive with recall, is that when you've had this engagement, when you've put your bubble up, you basically have to wait for your bubble to be back up before you can do a next hard engagement. You can be repositioning, you can get a mega during that time where that bubble is down, but going in without a bubble is like, especially with your bubble at 7-second cooldown and not like refreshing a second after you lost, is going to be death on Winston for sure.
Yeah.
If you're more comfortable on someone like Zarya, you can think of your bubble very similarly to her self shield, her shift, where if you're deciding to go aggressive and you don't have it, you need to be very aware of everything that can punish you, whether that's sleep cooldowns, CC, just damage, anything like that. But if you have it, then you can mitigate a lot of that and make your play happen. But we're on the Sigma now. A little bit more flexibility in our shield. So in this type of composition, where you have Ball and Sigma, it's sort of like a hybrid between dive and a slower, spammier composition, right? And you sort of take the role of a main tank. Sorry, just taking a look at this team fight.
It's a chaotic one.
Yeah, I think you're sort of, I don't want to say autopiloting with your shield, like you're just seeming like throwing it up, taking it down, throwing it up, taking it down, not throwing it up for specific windows. It just seems to be constantly like an oscillating fan. It's like going up, then it's coming down. It's going up, then it's coming down. Really make sure you're timing those things. If you're worried about things like shatter, if you're worried about things like on a sleep darts, about Sig's accretion on the enemy team, you should be saving your shield, keeping it down, similar to like on Winston, and only putting it up to block those specific abilities.
Okay.
Because now with the 2-second cooldown on it, it's a lot easier to punish Sig when he does take it down.
And just as a general note, and this is going to apply for most heroes, I suppose. Cooldowns, like, even Reinhardt's shield isn't really a cooldown, because you can flash it like crazy, but it's still like a resource. But when you're talking about like Winston's shield and Sigma's shield, because they are cooldowns, their primary task is going to be blocking cooldowns, not absorbing damage. I mean, like, absorbing the damage is kind of like a secondary benefit, but the main purpose is going to be blocking cooldowns. Like I really like that you ate the fire strike with the hole, and if they use their black hole, you rock that sort of thing. This is the sort of trade that you're looking for. You don't really want to be using your shield in order to just absorb random chip damage.
Yeah, that's all in the spirit of, one, keeping your shield at high HP for when you really need it, and being able to block those priority abilities, and then also you can use it to go aggressively once you have burned those cooldowns on them, because it's pretty cheap to throw your shield up and take it down, but it's not very cheap for Ana to throw her sleep dart or Sig to throw a rock. Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Rock's only 70 damage, right? It wouldn't have killed the tire anyway?
I don't think so. 2 left clicks and a melee would.
Yes.
That music.
But hard to react at that distance.
Yeah.
I would have assumed he would have been going the other way as well. I think that's what you were trying to do, trying to just get the kill on him while the tire was going somewhere else.
It did come as a surprise. Like I didn't even think he was going. I knew he had it, but I thought he was just gonna keep spamming up there, and then the tire came.
So that was actually, although this is a lost team fight, that actually looked like a good sign of life for what you were using your shield for. You saw your Genji go in, you identified the Ana has sleep, which is a threat to your Genji, and you tried to throw your shield in front of her. It was an awkward angle, and it didn't end up blocking anyway, but I could see the thought process was there. And that's exactly how you want to use Sig Shield.
There's actually a really good question from chat, Lou. And the question is, in what situations do you want to use cooldowns preemptively or proactively instead of in a trade?
When you have advantage. So either when you know you have more resources than the opponent, and that could be something as simple as defender's advantage, where you have positional advantage. It could be something where you have more ults than the enemy team and you want to use them faster. Otherwise, you risk the chance of them building them or them getting in a good position to counter them. It could be if you get a pick and they're a man down, then you can trade more aggressively and stuff like that. I think the best example is talking about something like Baptiste's Lamp, which is like the most valuable and longest cooldown ability in the game, where if the enemy either uses more resources and then puts them at a disadvantage, like for example, if the enemy Baptiste uses his lamp, you can then use your lamp super aggressively, knowing that you have that resource and they don't. The same would apply to if they're down a man, if they're down ultimates, if they have bad positioning, all that kind of stuff. Then you can trade aggressively with your cooldowns. Yes. And you can scale that down for cheaper abilities like Sigma Shield, like Rock, like on a Sleep Dart even. But that's generally the thinking, is when you are at advantage, then you can be a lot more aggressive with how you trade.
Yeah, so the way that I like to think about this, and just to draw it visually, so I would call these kind of like, we'll just call them renewable resources, where apparently we're environmentally friendly. And then we'll have this category, which is like cooldowns, and then we'll have this category, which is going to be ultimates.
Are you...
I am doing
something on stream?
I'm doing something on stream, yeah. You won't be able to see it on the screen share. So renewable resources, these are going to be things like your WASD. This is going to be like, shooting. It's the things that are very easily renewable, like walking, jumping, shooting, things that you can always do. And then you basically want to be doing these to force your opponent to proactively cool down. And then at that point, you can counter with your own, in order to kind of force them where they run out of resources first, and then you win over here. Now, it's like, if you are able to force an opponent in the situation that Tikatee was explaining, if you are able to force the opponent to Baptiste ult first, right? Then you can do that really aggressively because you have a massive advantage. And if you do that, they don't have that lamp anymore to respond with. If they don't have any ultimates to respond to in order to counter that final kind of cooldown difference, then they lose. So the way you kind of like do this proactively is by trying to force the opponent to use this series of resources, where I think that like it's pretty rare that you would use I suppose a cooldown in terms of like, unless the cooldown is going to get you to the end state of getting a kill or winning the fight directly. You want to be trying to do the more methodical approach of like walking around, jumping, shooting, positioning, all of those things in order to kind of force the opponent to use those cooldowns so that you can counter and end up winning the team fight, unless you have a play that is going to be like decisively win through scoring and elimination, basically.
Yeah, I think the best example of like renewable cooldowns is like setting up a flank.
Yeah.
on like any hero.
You can always
And then,
flank,
like-
right? You can always use
Yeah.
your WASD keys.
Okay,
For sure.
okay.
And that puts you in a state to potentially get an advantage, or at the very least draw resources away from them, to then find the next advantage, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's all about that back and forth, especially the higher up you go. So acknowledging when you have those advantages, when you're at a disadvantage, and changing your play accordingly is a big part of playing high level Overwatch.
And there is one question saying Mercy Dash or Mercy's Guardian Angel. Is it a cooldown or a renewable resource? So this is one of the things where I've put them into like 3 buckets to try and make it easier to understand. But in the same way where it's like Diva's shooting is a pure renewable resource because she doesn't have to reload. McCree has to reload a lot. So his is kind of, it's like they aren't binary buckets. There's going to be some things like Baptiste's Lamp, for example, that is actually probably closer to ultimate than it is to cooldown. And there's going to be cooldowns like Guardian Angel that are closer to like renewable resources. So it's this very like gradient of, you would almost order them by power, and you want to be using less powerful resources in more creative, tactical, and strategic ways in order for the opponent to have to use more powerful resources in order to just survive, and then you just trade. So that's another reason why using getting the maximum value out of your cooldowns is important. Where at the higher ranks, everybody knows how to get maximum value out of their cooldowns, and their usage is very optimized at that point. The actual how much value each cooldown gets is really, the difference is minor outside of like these massive pop-off moments where somebody does something absolutely insane, and that's where the trading of them really comes into play. Whereas like at this elo, where things are a little bit more chaotic, there's less of this kind of very defined and organized trading. Just the fact that you get more value out of your cooldowns and your ultimates is going to make you way, way more powerful and impactful in the games.
That makes sense.
All this to say, use your Sig Shield for cooldowns.
Yeah, I suppose that is what we were just saying.
Yeah. Oh my god, what a flux.
That was a big
That
one.
was massive. I was about to comment that this might not be a good idea, but it paid off, absolutely. So, the reason I wanted to maybe be a bit hesitant on this play is because you're aggressing through a choke point in which they have full control of their side of the choke. Theoretically, if they were really well coordinated, they could have survived that and then punished anyone who overextended to try and follow it up. But it was so big that the damage coming through was more than enough to warrant that aggression. So good job.
Oh!
Huge! Exact.
So
clap.
like shit like that is when we were talking about this buckets, like they used an ultimate and you countered it with a cooldown. So like in terms of the like shifting the power and the advantage in a fight, that's shit like that is
Exactly.
primo plays. So
You just sucked all the wind out of their sails.
yeah, that is such a massive play. I mean, you should be you should definitely be proud of that.
That's the Reinhardt tech coming in. You are ready. Unfortunately, they had a few more ultimates to use that we weren't entirely ready for. Namely the Tire and the Dragon Blade.
Yeah.
Hit you every
But
time.
already, if this wasn't an overtime fight, actually we might be okay. Okay, we're cleaning up.
No, Genji's gonna die. Oh my goodness.
That was scary.
He's gonna die to jump that front, right? Yeah. I think he still got it though. Nice.
I'm gonna have to shoot you down.
And then we're back on Diva. I'm assuming this was to get back faster,
Yeah, because it was in overtime.
And because Valve was already
All good.
played.
for sure.
Thank you. Time to raise my APM.
Little things like that. This is another thing where your micro missiles are going to be on cooldown pretty frequently, and using them really early in order to get some shield damage in there. I actually do like that. Micro missiles are surprising. Even Diva's got a surprisingly long fall-off range. One of the things that people don't realize about Diva is just how much shield damage that she does there. So I really, really like to punish, Reinhardts or Sigmas who use too much shield by just making sure their shield is broken way more often. So yeah, it's like if you're kind of worried about your cooldowns there, micro missiles are going to be pretty cheap and very effective against shields for punishing people who do use them like that. So I like that.
Gotcha.
Well, they really don't like you.
Fight. I think in order to turn this fight, I think you can keep playing. I was just going to sort of talk about the beginning of this fight. In order to actually make this fight work for your team, we had to aggress a lot earlier when they were coming through the choke. We were playing, a lot of us, on point. Like this whole game, we've been playing hyper aggressive, ulting through chokes, diving them deep, and getting punished for it. So maybe that's what triggered us to play a little safer for the very last fight since it was overtime. But that was actually the time we needed to be more aggressive. They had just used 3 ults the fight before that. They had no really big resources to break through that space. And we have the more mobile composition. Yeah, like right here. Our soldier should be set up high ground. Our Genji ball should be looking to go deep with you. But then we just come back to point. And they're free.
Let them take as much space as they want for free. So when we're talking, if we want to keep using this funnel analogy, it's like they were able to use all of these renewable resources, walking, jumping, shooting, and they got this space for free. So one of the things that I'm going to harp on, especially on D.Va, is like this high ground's important. Always, like gravity is free. That's one of my favorite things. Is that you can always get to low ground by just jumping off. Gravity's free. It doesn't charge a ticket. But getting to the high ground is always going to cost your boosters. So staying on this high ground sort of thing, like you can punish this high ground by staying up here. And it's like if their Ana's, or the Ana or the Moira's there, you can just be in a position to like drop off the high ground and really piss them off, make them use their nade or their orb or something like that. And then after that, there's this boost in here, right here. So I like to think about the like a team's zone of control, where you are right now very much inside of their zone of control, where like there's people who are behind you being able to shoot you. So if you are going to be trying to get these people, if there is, let me try and do this actually. If you want to be going after somebody in the middle of the team, you don't want to kind of go in and then stop and be in the middle of the team, because then you're just stuck there. This would be a situation where if you wanted to get some damage on the Reinhardt, for example, you could boost in with micros, try to get some damage on the target, and then finish on the high ground above there, because there's the Ana here, there's the Moira here, and you could be shooting down on them from above. But you get stuck here, and they're able to actually turn and fire on you. So you're 600 HP, which means that you can be really tanky. You can dive into the middle of the team, but you're going to be trading out a very large number of resources for you. And as a general rule, you don't want the opponent to be able to look in all directions, and you have to look in multiple. It's going to be easier for you to assess threats and what you should be doing if you can see all of the opponents at the same time. But if you put yourself in the center of an opponent's zone of control, like you have to be looking this way to look at the Reinhardt, you have to be looking this way to look at the supports, you don't quite know what the Junkrat's doing, you can't matrix everyone at the same time. So putting yourself inside of a team is very, very dangerous. So just in general on this, I would start on the high ground. If you drop to or mess with the supports, DM the orb or the nade as they walk in. Don't let them get that space for free. Dropping down is fine. You see an opportunity, boost over, finish on the high ground. But yeah, I mean, high ground, it's probably the number one thing that I see D.Va players, especially in low elos, not doing, is just staying on the low ground. When you have, like, if you're a mobile hero, high ground, man, it's free. So
yeah, I think the way I like thinking about situations like this is you want to give yourself as many options as possible. And by boosting directly into this Reinhardt, by starting on the low ground, you're only enabling yourself to fight on point against whoever's in front of you, basically. If you were to start on the high ground, you'd have a better view of what's going on, be able to make more informed decisions about when you should be engaging on who, stuff like that, as well as boosting through this Reinhardt, ending on the high ground, like Jayne's saying, lets you set up for the next engage rather than tie you into this long engage, waiting for your boosters to come up in 6 seconds. So you're basically locking yourself into this fight, similar to on Winston. If you're throwing down your bubble, you're locking yourself into that position rather than staying flexible enough to cover other parts of the map, other heroes and stuff like that. Basically, if I'm one of the backline members of the enemy team, if I'm the Ana, for example, and I see you use boosters and commit all your resources onto this enemy Rein, I'm free. I'm not worried about you at all.
Yep. Yeah, it's amazing how many ways we have to like. It's funny. You have ways of saying things, and I have ways of things. We're saying the same things two different ways. I love it. But it's one of my favorite sayings. I have a lot of favorite sayings. Is that a Roadhog is sometimes more threatening without using hook, because he always has the option to do that. Especially if you're a tracer, right? If you're trying to like farm a Roadhog or something, if he has his hook, the tracer always has to be burning resources at a higher rate in order to be like hedging against the threat of being hooked. Whereas as soon as that Roadhog is used hook, the tracer doesn't have to blink around as much, doesn't need to use recall, doesn't need to use cover as much. You can just like hard farm that Roadhog. Whereas like just you having the ability to go on the Ana if you wanted to, DM the Ana if you wanted to, boost the Ana if you wanted to, forces that Ana to play differently and in a way that is going to make her less effective over time. Or if she doesn't play like that, you just kill her.
Yeah, something that's like super underrated, especially in rank play too, is like brain power or attention as a resource.
Yes.
So it's like if that Ana like doesn't even need to think about you, she's gonna play fine. But if she's constantly worried about you getting on her, how much worse is she gonna play? How many more cooldowns is she gonna waste? How many shots is she gonna miss? That kind of thing.
I mean, that alone is. Well, we should stop ranting about. See, I am not the only person who rants forever about one pause frame, but this is also one of the reasons.
Okay. It's a deep concept. I think it's good to.
It's like
cover.
ball can be very effective because people always have to be looking behind them, be like, where is he coming from, or like fucking ball, and people start thinking about how tilting ball is to play against, not about like how to play their character or how to win the game. So, it's not. I mean, this is a little bit of more of a meta topic, but attention is a resource, not just having them pay attention to a different aspect of the game, but having them pay attention to something outside of the game, like how annoying you are you flanking, things like that. So where are we?
But yeah, unfortunately this basically just devolves into a brawl. They have a few more ultimates than you guys do, and of course their comp is more suited to this all-point brawl. And like I said, if we didn't make that dive happen earlier, or we didn't find any amount of backline pressure as they're coming to point, this is a very, very hard fight to win.
Yeah, I think if I did start off on the high ground, it would have helped to see the double-pocketed Rein that I was space tanking. Wasn't the best idea.
For sure. And yeah, it's not entirely on you, like I said. The ball, the Genji, the soldier even, all should have been set up differently. It's just probably a little bit of a defensive response, seeing that it was 99%. Similar to first fights, last fights are very easy to tunnel onto objectives. Like it's very easy to roll out and think about, oh, I need to touch the point because that's how we cap the point, when in reality that often puts you at a disadvantage in terms of positioning. Same thing goes for last fights. It's like, oh my god, it's 99%, all they have to do is cap and we lose. Let's all sit on the point, they can't take it. That will often put us at a disadvantage in terms of positioning, or at the very least give them more positioning to work with than they should have.
Staying on Diva for this one.
No, I do.
Last minute swap. Oh, we're thinking about it. Okay, Sigma. So again, back to this sort of hybrid. This time Ball doesn't have any divers with him necessarily, unless this is a very aggressive Pharah. Good protection on your soldier. I'm not a huge fan of this part of the map, but it's what your soldier chose and you're supporting him, so that's good.
Ooh, this is risky.
Ooh. So again, this is a bit of the same concept as on Diva. You're locking yourself to this brawl inside here by dropping, right? And they are way more suited and they have more members. They had control of the point, so they had more backup. They're way more suited to fighting in there. And unless you had some sort of big advantage you were pushing, that's a very, very risky move.
Oh, that's sad for your... Oh, your Genji survived that.
Ooh. The hog got slept, it looked like. Ooh.
I mean, it's
a
trade.
Have the pin up. Yeah, we take those.
So your team should be able to pull that out?
I understand. Attack the objective.
Yeah, I think that what... one of those situations where what Lou is saying is correct in that... with guarding the soldier sort of thing. But if the soldier wasn't there, whether it's Diva, whether it's Winston, or whether it's Sigma, all of the sort of situations, you've been focusing very much on fighting the main tank. even when the opponent has in this case, an Ana and a Moira, which is just an absurd amount of healing.
Not much you're going to do.
Not much you're going to do. So, in this situation where Lou alluded to it very early on in the Ilios Shrine map, where like splitting these healers sort of thing, where if you're going to be getting value, especially as a tank, Sigma is very high damage, but he's high damage over extended team fights. And with the positioning that you were in, it's going to be really difficult for you to actually be effective long enough to like really shell out those damage numbers. Whereas like even if you're on a Sigma, if you're on a little bit of an angle, or if you're a Diva on your high ground, kind of trying to like on a flanking high ground, or if you're a Winston doing split or going for the back line, that's going to force their healers to play differently. So they don't have the ability to actually heal that front line, or they have to reposition, or they have to use those cooldowns on themselves, which would make them more vulnerable to a follow-up with something like your Genji. So I think that, when we're talking about trying to get the most out of your cooldowns or the most out of your renewable resources, not just is it going to be how you're using them, but the tactics, which is like, tactics is how you do something. But the strategy, the more macro something, it's like what you're doing. So it's, you're attacking the Reinhardt and how you're attacking the Reinhardt versus you're attacking the healers and how you're attacking the healers. So, it's like you need to improve tactically how you use your cooldowns, but then also strategically who you're using your cooldowns on right now. And right now, it's like you're putting them onto the tanks, but this is Plat, and they have very, very high healing heroes where, if that Ana lands an anti-nade because you actually managed to tickle Reinhardt for 50 HP, suddenly the healing of Ana and Moira combined is going to be beyond anything you can even remotely do to damage them, and you're just going to slowly die. I'm going to sneeze.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think some trap that a lot of tank players fall into is forcing the frontline fight regardless of hero. Like even in Rein v Rein, it's entirely possible to win games in like a Rein v Rein situation by just avoiding the enemy Rein and setting up your team around them, making them useless essentially. Your job as main tank isn't always to outperform the enemy main tank. It's to enable your team in the best way possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you haven't been playing main tank in all these games, but even like Sigma can be considered a pseudo main tank when playing with a ball. You should be creating space that benefits your team the most, not that wins the main tank duel the most. And if you're playing brawl on brawl, sometimes you need to take those main tank fights, but realistically setting up people like Soldier on high ground, setting up flanks with Genji and stuff like that, in order to pincer like enemy backlines rather than take the fight on the enemy main tank, can be a lot more valuable in these kind of situations, especially on maps like Koth, where there's so much rotation involved. You can basically flip the map anytime you want just by moving around them and stuff like that. So I think what Jayne's saying is right. You are tunneling a little bit on the enemy main tank, even like swapping into Rein because you feel there's no other hero that can win that duel. So you need to swap to Rein. Just kind of shows that mindset. And if you're not playing to win the frontline duel, if you're playing a comp that doesn't win the frontline, if you're playing heroes that don't win the frontline, stuff like that, look for other ways to make your comp work. Look for other heroes on your team you can enable. Look for ways to set them up for success rather than always rushing to the frontline.
Dare I say, have a win condition?
This is not your time.
Yeah, because like you have even if you are going to match Reinhardt's here, because that's what you're focusing on the main tank duel, you have a Mercy, and the Mercy is going to be either like really going to be wanting to damage boost the Genji or the Soldier, and this is going to be the main difference, right? Is that they've gone all in on healing, and the Ana has some utility, but at this rank, it's likely going to be used for more healing, not for antis, at least not intentionally. So at this point, like you're trying to match the Reinhardt, but you're matching him in a domain in which you are still at a disadvantage. So to use the classic Sun Tzu code, you want to fight where the opponent's weak, not where he's strong, right? So you're trying to patch up the weakness where you could just like try and whatever the opponent's strength is, you want them to like be punching air. Just like, if you are weak in a domain, ignore it entirely and only fight where you are going to be strong. So this is going to be a situation where there was a massive disadvantage here between the frontline fight, and that's the fight you wanted to take. You tried to make that difference a little bit less by swapping onto Reinhardt, but they're still going to have the advantage, and now you have even less ability to win in domains that the rest of your team is playing in, with like the Genji, the soldier who's hopefully flanking, and the Mercy who's damage boosting those 2 DPS. You know, even in this situation, like, your Ana should be playing in a different way than healing you. Like, the way that your Ana's wanting to win this, if they've gone all in on this Moira and the Ana healing, you know, the way that your Ana's wanting to play, or should be wanting to play to win this, is to get that ante and negate 2 of their heroes.
Just as we're talking about tunneling on the Reinhardt, we turn away for the shatter.
Yeah.
Unluck.
Yeah. It was a tough fight anyway. You were at a pretty big numbers disadvantage.
Yeah, there wasn't anything you were doing there to turn it around.
Although, still our point. Our Genji decided to blade. Oop, you sucked him in.
Oh no! No! So close. I thought you were going to
close.
get the hammer. Hammer, and then you would have been able to shatter the Ana and the Ashe on the right side. That would have been awesome.
They were big
At the very
trades.
least,
Yeah.
at the very least, this would have been a really good trade for us, actually. That should have been a losing fight from 30 seconds ago.
Yeah, you got 30
But we
extra
made-
capture
like,
points on that.
And pulled out a bunch of ults from them.
Yep.
So we take those for sure.
This is going to be a big hammer. I'm feeling it.
Ooh,
Yeah, let's go!
huge.
Oh, so
Almost.
close.
Unfortunately, you got antied there. It kind of
Yeah.
meant you weren't allowed to follow up. Oh, goodbye, Hug.
You got res. Nice. Ooh, that Ana was 1 HP. Oh, the soldier got her.
So again, you're looking to take the Reinhardt duel. You're looking to force fights on the point, but look at what their Roadhog's doing. I would argue their Roadhog is a much bigger threat that you as the main tank should be forcing out than trying to force this fight on point. Because if all 6 of your members follow you right now and just, oh my goodness, well, also that can happen. If all your members were looking to push the point with you, for example, that Roadhog would be free flanking for hooks, free finding environmental kills, backline damage, and stuff like that. Where it's easy for you to get on point and start that duel, but it doesn't enable your team to do anything really. At the very most, you could hope for taking a lot of attention from the enemy team and hoping your team does something during that time. But the space you're fighting for isn't the same space your team wants to fight for.
Yeah.
And that's something important to remember.
This map specifically is one of the most unique ones, and it's actually probably one of the most difficult to challenge at the pro level because of things like that. So if you have the situation where the Roadhog is on that high ground, right? He's in a position where it's not the objective. And you can go on to the objective, but if you go on to the objective, then he's going to be this massive threat to you, and he's going to make it very hard for a sustained fight or for a flip to happen on the point. Other points that are like this, the first one that springs to mind is Ilios Ruins. This is a situation where going on to the point puts you at a disadvantage. There are other points where the point actually gives you an advantage to be on. I'm thinking Ilios, or sorry, Lijiang. What is the tower one with the like moat around it? Is it Garden? Yeah, it is Garden.
Yeah.
So Garden is one where the point is a fortification, and you can have these kind of differences between like fortifications and almost liabilities. So the term that I like to use for it is like flushing, is that you have to, these positions that are basically providing overlook, and they are fortified and allowing, a empowered assault on the point. You basically have to flush people out of those positions, install your own people into those positions before you go to the objective. The alternative to that is if you do have somebody like an Orisa, or I'm not sure if it works with new Orisa, but back when like Orisa meta was pro, you could try and force somebody onto the point if both teams have fortifications. So let's assume that kind of staircased area, no one's able to really be at it, but both people are kind of entrenched on the areas. Let me just visually show you what I'm talking about, right? So let's assume that the situation here is like nobody can be up here without dying, but you've got like an Ashe here on both sides, or a Widowmaker here on both sides. And you can even we've had it in situations where, like the areas that a Widowmaker was able to position was like this square and nowhere else, right? So they can see the point, but they're not going to fight each other because it's anybody who goes up there dies. So there's this like demilitarized zone almost sort of thing. So in this situation, what you kind of want to do is you can go onto the point to force somebody else to contest, but you're not actually fighting. You're just baiting a less
Creating attention,
survivable
yeah.
member onto the point so that they can die. Because it's like if you've got a Winston here and an Orisa here from both teams contesting the point, your job isn't to actually fight the other person. You're just to force another person onto the point to contest so that your team who's standing here can kill them. So, like, this map is probably one of the most strategically difficult maps to play as a team, and it can also make it really, really hard to do in ranked. But, yeah, it's oftentimes controlling, like, this area here is almost more important than controlling the point. So, yeah.
I think we're getting a little high concept.
Yes,
These things are really hard to execute without proper coordination, and it's good to acknowledge that when you're playing ranked, that you're not able to fully coordinate with your team like you would be in a team environment. So the best I would say you can do is look to enable members, like individual members. Like if you want to play for your soldier, say, hey, soldier, I'm going to push at the high ground. Come with me so you'll have good sight lines, stuff like that. Don't expect your team to be able to react to you baiting attention on point and stuff like that, because realistically, in ranked, all 6 people have 6 different ideas of what's going on and what they want to be doing. So coordinating with one person like that soldier or coordinating with the team just on a singular target like that hog is probably your best way of rallying their attention.
Mm-hmm.
We're coming up on the hour. Yeah.
Did you have any questions? Or, I mean, we basically just talked at you for a straight hour, which I apologize for not getting more of your input. But did you have any questions or things that didn't make sense and you wanted us to explain a little bit differently? What's on your mind right now?
I don't think I have any questions necessarily. I think it's more of just and I don't know, trying to get the concepts that we talked about earlier, like looking at it, that all of the tanks that I played today, that I do just look at the main tank at all times, the enemy main tank, even if that's not necessarily where where the fight should be anyway. Like being inside of Ryan's hammer range when I'm Sigma, when I can be at range, there's no need for me to be in front of him, kind of thing. So looking at actually other angles and areas where the better fight would be with the characters who I picked.
For
I
sure.
think that'll actually help a lot inside the future, instead of always trying to 1v1 the main tank no matter what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's because 1v1ing the main tank is very, very comp dependent. It's only in rare situations or in situations where you have like Earth Shatters is it going to be actually coming down to the old classic main tank difference.
Yeah. I will say too, on King of the Hill specifically, I think every map except like a select few, like maybe Nepal Village is a good example. You can rotate on every single Koth map except a few. I make Legion Garden, the one you were mentioning, actually a pretty good example too, where you can choose any way to approach this point. So take the time to scout out where the real threats are. Don't immediately assume that you need to go to the point. Don't immediately assume you need to match the main tank. Look for where the threats are and look for where you can enable your team, and then play for that space. Like Jayne said, play for where you're strong and they're weak.
Yeah, makes sense.
Or I guess I should say, like Sun Tzu said.
Like Sun Tzu said. Don't worry, if you say that thing without referencing Sun Tzu, chat will be down your throat.
Have you read The Art of War, Jayne?
I actually have. I mean,
Me too.
Years ago, but I actually have read it.
I had a thought a while ago of like turning the chapters into Overwatch references.
Oh no!
And I think my favorite one was there's literally a chapter about starting fires in the enemy kingdom. And I was going to equate that to dive comp.
I mean, I've still been looking for an April Fool's Day piece of content, so maybe we'll have to do that. But yeah, I mean, I there was a period where I read all the famous historical strategy books. Like, I think The Prince was my favorite Machiavelli's, but yeah. I mean, I love all those books. I mean, there's a reason it's famous. As much of it is a little bit of a cliche. Like, there is some good advice in there that is applicable to even video gaming, so.
For sure.
Imagine Sun Tzu thinking about two people explaining his concepts in a video game. But anyway, Mad Scientist, we are coming up on the hour, but I hope that you got some value out of this. I appreciate you volunteering to do this on stream. But yeah, and we'll make sure that we get a copy of the VOD sent over to you. And if you do have any follow-up questions, let us know, and we'll be happy to do follow-up with you.
Will do. It was nice being here. Thanks for the coaching. I'm sure I will be back because it's not over yet.
Awesome. Next stop, Diamond.
Hopefully.
All right. Cheers, mad scientist. You have a great day.